Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 7-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm at Pennell16, CPen16 over on IG. And if you miss more content, over on Patreon, links in the description below. But wait until tomorrow. It is August 31st. And if you don't know how Patreon works, you're going to get charged on the 1st of the month. So wait until tomorrow if you are interested. If not, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So the pitching. It's great up top. You got Shane Bieber, Garrett Cole, Max Fried. Some of the best pitchers in the league and some of the best pitchers so far this season. Shane Bieber has just been on an absolute tear. After those three, it falls off a cliff. All of the SP2 options are pretty much pure garbage today. There's a couple of spots that are like okay, but I don't feel that confident with them. I mean, I put Trevor Williams here just because he's been serviceable in most games this year. And he's facing a Brewers team that is striking out a ton versus righties. So I think he's a serviceable play to get in your stacks. But for the most part, my plan is to spend up at pitching. I typically don't like to go over 20K at pitching for my two pitchers combined, but I make exceptions on certain slates, and this is one of them. I think we're just going to end up plugging in Shane Bieber and Garrett Cole. I was playing around with builds with plugging those two in. Now, you're going to have to use a couple of 2K punt options, but there's actually quite a few today that are serviceable. So I actually don't hate the idea of using Bieber and Cole, and you can still get some Coors Field bats in. It's not impossible today, so big fan of the double spend up. I have Fried and Williams listed here just because I don't have two pitchers listed, but for the most part, I think the plan is to double spend up at pitcher day. I hope they just get your 25 to 30 fantasy points, which they pretty much have the capabilities of doing most slates. So that's the plan. Spend up a pitcher day and we'll find our value bats, and I have plenty of value bats listed. But we'll start up top with Shane Bieber. He comes at 11,000. You guys know he's my favorite pitcher. I'm an Indians fan. I love watching Shane Bieber pitch, but it also helps that he's amazing at baseball as well, and Vegas likes him here too. Only 3 runs for the Kansas City Royals here, 67% chance for the win, and 7.5 strikeouts in Vegas. The past 2 seasons combined for Shane Bieber, an elite 5% walk rate, 32% K rate, and a 2.94 xFIP. His one minor struggle is lefties, but I mean the lefties on the Royals are just, they're not going to really do anything. Alberto Mondesi, Nicky Lopez, I mean, good luck. And Alex Gordon, I don't think they're going to have any success here, and Shane Bieber should be able to mow down this lineup. If we're looking at his game log this season, he's just been fantastic pretty much every start. His worst game this year was 19.9 fantasy points, and that's versus a White Sox team that has plenty of power. So he's been super impressive. His first start of the year was actually versus the Royals. He scored 41 fantasy points and struck out 14. Pitch count, never an issue with Shane Bieber. His lowest pitch count total was his first game of the season at 97. Besides that, he's been well over 100 or around 98 to 99 pitches. So literally everything checks out for Shane Bieber. It's a soft matchup versus the Royals. If you're looking at their splits versus righties this season, 24% K rate, which isn't huge, but it's still a decent K rate for a pitcher. 174 ISO, 235 batting average. It's not like they're the worst lineup in the world, but they're not the best lineup either. So Shane Bieber, look, he's going to be fine here. In my opinion, he's been the best pitcher in baseball this year. And then going down to, I guess, my SP2 of this slate, as weird as that sounds, with Garrett Cole at 10,000. But I plan on playing Shane Bieber and Garrett Cole together today. I'm not sure how well it's going to be for my bats, but I still think I can fit in some decent bats because there's a couple of 2K options today that I don't mind playing. So Garrett Cole, I guess, is my SP2. If you want to spend down and you can make Garrett Cole your SP1 and then you use a guy like Fried or Trevor Williams, that's fine too. But my plan is to play Bieber and Cole as of right now. Again, things can change. It's only 9 in the morning, but this looks like the best way to go. But anyway, Garrett Cole, he's a fantastic pitcher. Only 3.4 runs for the Tampa Bay Rays here, 57% chance for the win, and 8.5 strikeouts in Vegas. And if you're looking at the past 2 seasons combined for Garrett Cole, I mean, obviously they're going to be very elite numbers. He was so good last season. He hasn't been, I would say, as great this year, but he's still been a fine pitcher. 39% K rate, 2.63 xFIP. Now, he will give up a little bit to the lefties, so maybe he gives up like a solo shot to a lefty. I could see something like that happening to Shane Bieber, but even that, I really don't expect it. It's just possible. But, I mean, they're striking out guys at an insane clip. Garrett Cole had a 43% K rate to lefties last season. And if we take a look at Garrett Cole's game log, he's just been pretty darn solid. Now, he hasn't had the insane ceiling games like Shane Bieber. Like, Shane Bieber's had multiple 40-point outings. We have not seen that from Garrett Cole. His best game has been 31 fantasy points, but even then, he's been solid. 15, 26, 31, 20, 19, 23, 24. He's always got that 40-point upside as well. In his most recent start versus the Tampa Bay Rays, he scored 26 fantasy points, struck out 10 over 6.2 innings. And then in his second last start versus the Tampa Bay Rays, he scored 20 fantasy points and struck out 10 in only 4.2 innings. And again, pitch count is not an issue with Garrett Cole here. He's been well over 100 pitches in multiple outings. So Shane Bieber, Garrett Cole, it's our highest floor, highest ceiling upside plays here. And I feel very comfortable with them in my lineups given the rest of the options here. Like Lucas Giolito's coming off a no-hitter, but 10,400, I can get Garrett Cole for a little bit cheaper, and I just don't expect him to throw another no-hitter, so I don't really want to spend that much for him. Glass now seems a bit expensive, but I know he's a great pitcher, but I don't love that. Marquez, I think, would be viable, but again, Coors Field, and last time he was in Coors Field, he gave up 10 runs, so it doesn't really matter who you are. Coors Field can certainly get the best of you. I like the price tag, and there's always strikeout upside with him, but I'd prefer the Coors Field bats, and just looking down the list, I see nothing. Like Eric Lauer's facing Pittsburgh, but he sucks, and the Pirates have actually been hitting lefties very well this season. And then there's just really no options whatsoever besides maybe Trevor Williams. So my plan is to spend up. I know I keep saying it, but I'm just trying to give you the reasons why, because I just see nothing really usable down here. And then if you want a pivot off of a Cole or a Shane Bieber, we have Max Fried here at 9,200, who's had a very excellent season so far. He only has a 1.35 ERA. I hate to use ERA, but I mean the xFIP, I don't know off the top of my head just this season, but the past two seasons combined, it's right there with his ERA at 3.36. It's actually a little bit lower than his ERA. And if we're looking at the game log this year, he's been good. 14, 28, 17, 23, 24, 19, and 22. I mean, he's been just fine. He has not faced Boston this season, but even though they went off last night, or yesterday afternoon, I should say, they have not been that great of a team. If we're looking at their splits versus lefties, I'd have to imagine it's not going to be as awful just because they got guys like JD Martinez and some other lefty smashers. But 21% K rate, only a 6% walk rate, 178 team ISO, 273 batting average, and a 106 WRC plus. It's not like a great matchup, but it's not terrible either. And Boston has just not been as good as we think we would have thought they would have been this season offensively. And we know JD Martinez hasn't been like lighting the world on fire anyway, and he got hit with a pitch on his wrist yesterday, so I've not seen the injury update, but if he happened to miss this game, obviously it would be a boost for Max Fried because he's one of the best lefty mashers in the entire league, so if you take him out of the lineup, yeah, Fried will be even in better play, but I'd have to double check on the news. As of right now, and I was looking at lineup projections, he was supposed to be in, so I feel like he will be in, but if not, again, boost for Fried, but I think he's fine here. Only 4 runs for the Boston Red Sox, 64% chance for the win, 5.5 strikeouts. He's got a 25% K rate, 3.36 xFIP. The numbers are fine either way here. So Max Fried's a fine pivot off of Garrett Cole or Shane Bieber. And then if you want a punt SP2 option to fit in your Coors Field bats, I think Trevor Williams is okay at 6,000. Now, do I think he's a good pitcher? I do not. And I have some interest in some of these Milwaukee lefties because he's a guy that will struggle with left-handed bats quite a bit. And his ERA is 5.34 in the season, and he's had some gross games. He's also had some serviceable games. So his gross games were versus St. Louis in his first start of the season. He had 4.1 points. Then his most recent start versus the White Sox, he had -3. But the White Sox are a pretty good squad, and that's kind of what I'd expect Trevor Williams to do versus a White Sox team. But if you look past those two starts, he's been okay. 13 points, 20 points, 12 points, and 12 points. Now it's versus the Indians, Reds, Minnesota, and Chicago. So I wouldn't say it was an absolute cakewalk. So Williams has been okay, not really expecting to get blasted here. Milwaukee's been a team that is striking out quite a bit versus righties this season, and just overall has been pretty bad. 27.4% K rate, 1.46 ISO, or 0.146 ISO, 198 batting average, 275 WO, and a 68 WRC plus. So if you don't like the double spend up route, I think Trevor Williams at 6K is a fine option here. I mean, could he very well go negative today? Sure, but at 6K and given the nature of the slate, I think he's our best cheap SP2 option. If you don't like the double spend up and you feel like you need more bats, Williams at SP2 I think is fine. Like in cash games, I'm probably not going to go there. But if you're building tournament lineups and you're like, yeah, I want to stack the Phillies today, well, a lot of the Phillies are pretty expensive, like Real Muto and Bryce Harper, you're going to need to go down with your pitchers because it's just not viable if you go Bieber and Cole. So I don't hate the Trevor Williams play as a punt. Or I say punt. He's like 6K. It's not like he's 4,500, but I think he's all right. He's all right. 4.5 strikeouts in Vegas. There's no implied team total out yet, so we'll see what that looks like. But I could see Milwaukee probably getting closer to 5. Just Williams is not good. He really struggles with lefties. If you're looking at his splits, 226 ISO to lefties. Even to righties, it's pretty high. But the strikeout rate's only 12% to lefties. So we'll see how that goes. But it looks like he's the most viable, cheap option. So we'll move on to the bats now. And there's quite a few good stacks on the slate. I'm really liking Philly. I like San Diego. I like Colorado. And I think there's another team off the top of my head. Or Atlanta as well. And Washington's kind of in a different tier, but I think they're viable too. But anyway, we'll start up top with JT Realmuto. If you're going cheap at pitcher, like with a guy like Trevor Williams, you can use Realmuto. If you're not going to be able to spend up at catcher today. I think there's other positions I'd rather spend up, like at third base or shortstop. Those tend to be the positions I like to spend up because, yeah, Machado, Arenado, Tatis, and Story. So a catcher's not really a position I like to spend up on. But if you're stacking the Phillies, Realmuto, he's been hitting the ball well. And going up against Eric Fetty, I believe that's how you always say his name. It's a fun name. It's better than Fed. I believe it's Fetty. But Realmuto is fine versus lefties or righties. He's arguably the best hitting catcher in the league. And Fetty's just not a great pitcher. 193 ISO to lefties, only 11% K rate. To righties, the ISO goes down, but the strikeout rate's only 13%. So I think the Phillies are fine here. They have one of the higher totals on the slate at 5.34. I say 4-5 combination mix there. But yeah, Phillies are fine. He's just very expensive. Then Omar Narvaez, 2,800. So I said Trevor Williams is a decent punt option, but look, he sucks versus lefties, and I like Narvaez quite a bit. I'd imagine he's going to be the chalk catcher here. I'm going to try to fit him in. If I have to go a little bit lower, it is what it is. It's just the catcher position. But I like Narvaez here. He's pretty good versus righties, and as I mentioned, Trevor Williams is very, very bad versus lefties, and Narvaez is over a 200 ISO to righties, 123 WRC plus, a 290 batting average, so I think he is certainly a viable option here. Probably going to be the chalk catcher, if I had to imagine. If I had to guess, I should say. And then Jacob Stallings, 2,700, going up against a lefty in Eric Lauer. Lauer has been complete trash the past 2 starts, and Stallings actually has some decent splits versus lefties. A 255 ISO, a 400 WOBA, 596 slugging, a 340 batting average, and a 149 WRC plus. So don't mind Stallings. If you're using Trevor Williams today, you're probably not using Narvaez, so I don't mind dropping down to Stallings. Then going down to first base, it's got some good spots here. So we have Freddie Freeman at 5,300. Like the Braves on this slate, Colton Brewer and the Boston pitching staff is just not someone I'm going to be too scared of today. Now, if you're looking at Brewer's splits the last 2 seasons, apologize. So he's actually been better versus lefties, but I still think both sides of the plate are in play here. Only a 169 ISO to lefties and a 26% K rate. To the righties, though, 375 WOBA, 173 ISO, and a 16% K rate and a 15% walk rate. But, Boston's just been so bad this season pitching-wise, and I think the Braves are going to probably be one of the best stacks in the entire slate. I think their team total is at, 5.47, which, again, I think is only below the Coors Field game. So 6.25 for the Padres and the Rockies. So definitely like the Braves here. Freeman just smashes righties looking at his splits. 154 WRC plus, 412 WOBA, 280 ISO, 310 batting average. Yeah, I like Freeman if you got the money for him, if you're just stacking up the Braves. Then Eric Hosmer, 5,200. Look, the Coors Field, the Padres went off last night. If you guys follow the MLB Home Run Twitter account, I feel like every single notification I got was the Padres later in the day because they weren't on the main slate, but they were just going off, man. Well, Hosmer versus a righty, always in play for me. Now, Marquez is a good pitcher, so I'm always hesitant stacking against him, but he's got some pretty wide splits when it comes to lefties and righties, so always prefer lefties here versus Marquez. I'm probably, for the most part, stay away from the righties in cash games, but if you're stacking, I say that, but then Machado and Tatis can pretty much hit anybody well, so I guess I shouldn't say that, but guys like Will Myers, I wouldn't use in cash, maybe just full. I really would just use him at all. I just prefer the lefties for the most part. But looking at his splits, very tough on righties. 28% K rate, 4% walk rate, 149 ISO, and less than a 300 WOBA. But when it comes to the lefties, 216 ISO, 328 WOBA, and a 20% K rate. So I like the lefties here versus Marquez. Eric Hosmer is super expensive, though, so I understand if you can't get to him. But he's fine in Padres stacks. And then Rhys Hoskins here at 4,400. I like the Phillies here, and I actually think this game is certainly stackable. Washington's been hitting the ball pretty well recently, so you can fully game stack this. I'm surprised Washington's team total is not higher than it is, to be honest, but I'm hoping that kind of keeps people off them because I think they're fine in tournaments. But don't mind Reese's Pieces here. He's better versus lefties. Numbers versus righties aren't all that great. Only a 215 batting average last year and a 26% K rate, but over a 200 ISO, and Fetty's just not a pitcher that I'm really concerned of, so don't mind Hoskins at all. Daniel Murphy, 3,800. He's pretty cheap for being in Coors Field. I know Garrett Richards isn't a terrible pitcher, but he did give up 6 runs in his last start, so he's certainly hittable, and I believe that was versus the Mariners. It's like he was in Coors Field, so don't really mind anybody here versus Richards. I mean, the Rockies are tied for the highest team total in the slate, and they can certainly do some damage, and it's Coors Field, so I really don't care who the pitcher is. I'll take anybody in Coors Field versus them for the most part. And Richards, if you're looking at his numbers last season, it wasn't as big of a sample size. Like if you're looking 700 ISO to righties, that's just not going to be the case. 190 ISO to lefties, but I pretty much like anybody in Coors today. Really nothing special about anybody. If you're in Coors Field, you're always playable. But I prefer the cheaper options because, again, I'm planning on spending up a pitcher, so probably not going to be able to pay up for these expensive bats for the most part. Maybe 1 or 2, but outside of them, not going to be going too Coors crazy. Then Bobby Dalbec, I believe that's how he said his name. He got the call up yesterday, one of their top prospects, and he homered. It's usually how it seems to go. I feel like whenever a top prospect gets called up, they go deep. But he's the bare minimum at 2K. He's also eligible at third base as well. So I'd have to imagine he's going to have some ownership tonight. Now, I don't like using really anybody versus Max Fried in the slightest, but at 2K, he's going to allow me to get in my guys like Cole and Shane Bieber. So I certainly think he is viable here. If we're looking at Fried splits, it's not going to look great for really anybody. Versus lefties, he's tough. Versus righties, he's tough, but still a little bit more power and a higher WOBA. So I think Dalbec. I'm sorry, I've never heard his name being said. I didn't watch the game. I was just following on the MLB Home Run app, or not the MLB Home Run app, the MLB app, that game. And it was nice because I fully stacked that game in most of my lineups, and it just kept getting hits and hits and hits. And it was a very nice day yesterday, so that was nice to see. I unfortunately did not put him in my lineup, but at 2K still, he is certainly viable. Jake Cronenworth, 4,700. He's finally pretty expensive, but he's been hitting the ball pretty well. He went deep yesterday. I remember seeing on the app, and at 4,700, it's a little expensive, but second base is horrible today. Like, it's a really bad position, so Cronenworth, he kind of stands out as the best option. I mean, we don't have any splits here from this season because I haven't really updated the statistics yet on this year for the splits. I have some of the team stats updated, but it's still been a short season, so I'm hesitant to using just so far this year's numbers. But I mean, Cronenworth's been fine versus righties, and Marquez, I prefer the lefties again, so don't mind Cronenworth at a pretty weak position today. Ryan McMahon, again, this is just a Coors Field bat. Looking at his splits, it's not going to look anything too impressive, but a 186 ISO to righties, 342 on base percentage. Look, it's just Coors Field, and second base is a horrendous position today. Jace Peterson, I could see him getting ownership just because he's 2K, and I feel like other people are going to want to double spend up today. And he's just a very, very dirt cheap lefty versus Trevor Williams. Looking at Jace Peterson's splits, they suck. Yeah, he's 2,000. What do you expect? But Trevor Williams is a guy we can certainly use lefties against, and he's free, so he's viable. You're just kind of hoping he gets a hit for the most part. And then drop it down to third base. We have some heavy hitters in Manny Machado and Nolan Arenado. It's tough to say who I'd go with because Machado's been on fire. Like, he's just been on a complete tear recently. But again, I don't like really using righties versus Marquez. But Nolan Arenado, he's facing Richards, which isn't the worst pitcher in the world, but I feel like he's more hittable than Marquez. I guess I'd maybe side with Arenado here, but both are elite options if you got the money for him. But Machado, 5,700, looking at his splits, they actually do fall off quite a bit compared to lefties and righties. But again, he's been great so far this season. It's just I really do worry about the matchup for Marquez versus Marquez. I could see Machado striking out a couple of times here versus him, so we'll see how it goes. But if you got the money for Machado, I wouldn't talk you off of it, but the matchup doesn't grade out well. But Coors Field kind of negates a lot of things. Then Arenado, 5,600. He's better versus righties than Machado is versus righties. 258 ISO, 382 WOBA, 315 batting average, just elite numbers all around. And Richards, I'd say he's more hittable than Marquez is. So I like Arenado quite a bit. Both are fine, but I guess I'd kind of have a slightly into Arenado here. Then Austin Riley, 3,200. Going to be hitting at the bottom of the order, but I do like this Brave stack on the site. They have one of the highest team totals. And only 3,200, I think he's viable. He's better versus lefties, but he's still got some pop versus righties with over a 200 ISO, but an extremely high 36% K rate and a 215 batting average. So it's just a cheap option on a good stack tonight. That's really the nicest thing I can say. And then I realize I'm out of order. I should have had Eric Gonzalez here first. But anyway, Eric Gonzalez should be leading off here versus the lefty Eric Lauer. Now, it's not like he's a great hitter. Looking at the numbers last year, only a .042 ISO to lefties, but did have a 333 batting average, and he's dirt cheap, so I think he's fine. Eric Lauer has struggled his past 2 starts. If you're looking at Lauer's splits, he gives up actually more to the lefties compared to the righties, but it's not like he's great versus either, to be honest, especially this season. So Lauer is not someone that really concerns me. Jose Ozuna, He's the bare minimum of 2,000, so I could see him getting ownership just for that reason. He's also eligible in the outfield as well, which tends to boost guys' ownership. Last season, he was actually better versus righties, actually like quite a bit better versus righties, but he's fine here. You don't really need much at 2,000 whatsoever. And these guys would not be on my radar, but since I plan on spending up at pitching, I had to give some more value options on this slate to make it fair. Then drop it down to shortstop. Again, we have a lot of heavy hitters. This is probably a position I'll end up spending up on. I tend to spend up at the shortstop position most nights because it's pretty loaded for the most part. But Tatis, 6,100, one of the best hitters in baseball. Again, I prefer the lefties here versus Marquez, but if you're full stack on the Padres, it's hard to leave off their best hitter. So definitely have some interest in Tatis. Better versus lefties, but still have elite numbers here versus righties. So don't mind Tatis. Trevor Story, 5,800. You can save a couple of bucks. Same scenario as Nolan Arenado. You can save a couple of bucks, and I think he gets a softer matchup here versus Garrett Richards. And Trevor Story has been elite versus right-handed pitching. I could go into all the numbers, but you get it. It's Coors Field, their own play. Trey Turner, 5,500. He's been on fire. I think he's dealing with a really long hit streak right now. Yeah, I just pulled up his DK game log. I'm looking at his numbers. He has been on fire. 20, 15. I mean, his worst game in the past, or at least since August 14th, has been 3 points versus Miami. But besides that, 8. I mean, he's been awesome, and you got that stolen base upside as well. So he's hitting 360 on the season. So very impressed with what I'm seeing with Trey Turner recently. And I certainly think he's viable. Going up against Spencer Howard here. Well, I lost my spot really quick. So 5,500 going up against Spencer Howard. I'm surprised the Nats total isn't closer to 5, if not above 5. I was a little surprised when it was only 4.66. But Spencer Howard, he's a highly regarded prospect for the Phillies, but he's just not been like fantastic yet. And I like Trey Turner. I mean, he's good versus lefties. He's good versus righties. Had more power versus righties last season, but I think he's a fine option, and he's been an absolute fire. I think you can use him in cash games. Probably better suited for Washington stacks, but certainly viable in all formats for me just because of how good he's been. Dansby Swanson at 4,700. Going up against Eric Fedde. If you're looking at Swanson splits, he's fine versus either side of the plate, and he's been pretty good so far this season. 174 ISO to righties. 240 batting average is low, but he's been pretty good this year. And look, I like the Phillies, all the Braves bats here. They have one of the higher team totals, and Colton Brewer is a guy that actually struggled more versus righties, but either side of the plate is in play here for the Braves. Didi Gregorius, 4,200, also like the Phillies quite a bit, and they have a team total of 5.43, and Didi's been hitting the ball pretty well the past few games, and I actually always like Didi versus lefties a little bit better, but he's got fine splits versus righties too with the near 200 ISO at 186. All the other numbers aren't going to be too pretty, but he doesn't strike out a lot, and he's been doing well this season, so I don't mind Didi here versus Eric Fedde. And then Bryce Harper, 5,900. If you're stacking the Phillies, you can't leave off their best bat, him and JT Realmuto. The problem is they're just super, super expensive, so it's going to be tough to fit them in if you do double spend up. So I think if you're playing some of these Phillies bats, you're probably having to dig down to a guy like Trevor Williams or maybe even Max Fried. But Harper, he's fine versus both sides of the plate, so I like Harper. Charlie Blackmon, 5,800. You're just getting one of the best hitters in baseball in Coors Field versus a righty. Anytime he's facing a righty in Coors Field, he's going to be one of the top plays on this slate projection-wise. Just elite numbers overall to righties, 318 batting average, and just you guys don't need me to tell you that Charlie Blackmon is a good play in Coors Field versus a righty. Juan Soto, 5,700. So kind of been disappointing the past 2 games. I don't think he's done. Let me check that really quick. Yeah, he scored 8 and 5 points the past 2 games. I've loved him in each one. I made him the thumbnail picture of my videos, but haven't gotten that illustrious home run. But on the season, he's been fine. I mean, 360 batting average, 9 home runs, and 21 RBIs. I'm just reading off the DK thing really quick. But, I mean, yeah, we know he's one of the best hitters in the league versus right-handed pitching. Spencer Howard is a young pitcher who can certainly make some mistakes. So don't mind Soto if you're stacking up the Nationals. I mean, 303 ISO, 155 WRC plus, 584 slugging versus righties. So yeah, I like Juan Soto if you got the money for him. And I think the Nats are excellent targets in GPPs today. Hoping they go overlooked because their team total is not as high as some of these other offenses. And then Trent Grisham, 4,900. He had a good game yesterday and going up against as a lefty versus Marquez. He is certainly playable. Love all the guys in Coors Field. Prefer lefties versus Marquez. So I think Grisham is obviously an excellent play. Ronald Acuna dealing with a hamstring injury, but he is expected to be in the lineup tonight. And if you're stacking up the Braves, you can't leave off Acuna. So certainly viable here. He's fine versus lefties and versus righties. And Brewer was actually a guy that did struggle more versus the righties. So definitely like Acuna here if you're stacking Braves. Marcell Ozuna, same scenario here, 4,100. Actually had some really good splits versus righties last season. 113 WRC plus, 341 on base percentage, 224 ISO. So Ozuna's fine. I like all the Braves bats. Andrew McCutchen, like all the Phillies bats. He's got some good splits versus righties, but he's leading off. He's cheap. He's fine. Sorry, I'm just going through this really quick, but there's just nothing much I can really say. I've already talked about the matchups for the offenses, so now we're kind of just blitzing through it. But Adam Eaton, he had a triple last night. I wish he was still hitting higher in the order, but he still did okay. I think he ended up with 10 points and only 3,600, so certainly viable. I do like the game stack for this Washington Phillies game. Raimel Tapia, 3,800, cheap and leading off in Coors Field. Got some fine splits versus righties, but not a lot of power. But he's got that double and triple upside because the guy can run. And then we have Matt Kemp, 3,000. He's facing a righty. I always prefer him more versus lefties, but at only 3K, he's fine. He is fine. Then Sam Hilliard, 2,700. So last season, he had some really good splits versus either side of the plate. Now, again, it's a limited sample size, but he's been hitting the ball well this season. He's shown some power. So Sam Hilliard at 2,700. Fine option. And again, if I'm spending up a pitcher today, I'm going to have to find some of these cheap value bats. And I always like getting some cheap value bats in Coors Field if I can, or on some of the best offenses on these slates. So Hilliard and Kemp definitely do qualify for that. So that's pretty much going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. Really do appreciate it. We have NFL coming up soon. We have NASCAR this weekend, the start of the playoffs. So a lot to look forward to. Should be pretty fun. And I hope you guys enjoy your Monday. I know they're never the most fun days of the week, but hey, Friday will be here soon enough. So see you guys in the next video, and thank you for watching.